I never thought I'd ever admit this to anyone, especially not to strangers, but here it is plainly. My husband of 20 years is cheating on me with our son's 18-year-old girlfriend. This sentence feels like placing my bare palm on a searing stove and deliberately holding it there. The pain, raw and absolute, demands an answer to a single, ceaseless question. Why? I am 41, a stay-at-home mother since Eric's arrival, followed 3 years later by Mary. Our home, for so long, smelled of morning coffee and the comforting dampness of laundry on rainy days. And for too long, I clung to the belief that these familiar scents meant we were intact. Paul, 48, the finance guy, would return late, loosen his tie, and let his briefcase drop with the weight of 100 pounds. Many nights, I convinced myself that the silence between us was merely the necessary cost of building a life. Perhaps every marriage endures a season when the very air feels thin, stretched taut. Eric, 18, possesses that disarmingly charming quality boys develop as they begin to inhabit their own skin. All sharp elbows and unfiltered honesty. Mary, 15, is flint quick, yet possesses a surprising softness where it truly matters. They are, without question, the best parts of me. If I am a house, they're the lights I instinctively switch on first. Amy entered our orbit 4 years ago, their freshman year sweetheart. She had that luminous, photographer-ready smile, a face that instinctively knows how to find the light. She laughed at our dinner table precisely as I'd always imagined a future daughter-in-law would, though, of course, they were just children then. I'm not foolish. Still, she'd stack her dishes, ask about my day, and text me pictures of stray cats, convinced we should adopt them all. Truth be told, I loved her a little for the simple fact that she loved my son. Rewind far enough, and the first fracture was remarkably ordinary. It was a Wednesday in late September, an evening that simply fell into the sink of the day and vanished. Paul came home after 9, smelling of the city, exhaust fumes, polished glass lobbies, the faint metallic tang of elevator brass. He brushed my cheek with a kiss, missing my mouth, and it registered like a slight clerical error. In the kitchen, he mumbled about jumpy markets. On the couch, he fell asleep during the second act of a movie he'd chosen. I draped a throw blanket over him, an instinctual gesture I no longer knew how to withhold. Then winter descended. The children carried in the cold air with their laughter. Amy arrived with sugar cookies she'd baked, shaped like perfect snowflakes, the royal icing leaving tiny, shimmering stars on everyone's lips. Paul couldn't stop complimenting them. "These are dangerously addictive," he declared, and I smiled, agreeing. When Amy's back was turned, he quietly asked for the recipe. A peculiar twinge resonated within me then, like stepping on a stair I hadn't known was missing. I chided myself, dismissing it as petty. He was simply being charming, for Eric's sake. Normal. This is precisely how it begins. 1,000 normal moments accumulating, stacking themselves like innocent sheets of paper. And somewhere deep within that stack, an unseen match continues to smolder. The thing I ultimately found didn't announce its presence. It was merely lodged between the mattress and the headboard, like a forgotten receipt. I remember sinking onto the edge of the bed, holding it in my hand, and the chilling thought that sliced through me, "Oh, this belongs to someone else's life." I laughed then, a hollow, disbelieving sound of someone who utterly fails to grasp the joke. I called for Mary. Ridiculous, I know. She bounced in, glitter on her sleeves, full of algebra frustrations. "Not mine," she declared, her eyebrow arched, a hint of teenage disgust. "Gross, Mom." She vanished in a wave of adolescent finality, leaving me standing there, proof in hand, yet no narrative to contain it. I washed it. That is the honest truth. I placed it in a delicates bag with my bras and ran the gentle cycle. When the dryer hummed its final tune, I folded it, tucked it deep into the back of my underwear drawer, and convinced myself that any alternative would simply blow the roof off our meticulously constructed house. I needed more than a single thread to tug, I rationalized. Denial, you see, is a meticulous chef. It knows precisely how long to simmer the pot, ensuring the kitchen still smells convincingly of dinner. Last week, his phone illuminated. I wish I could claim I was snooping, that I made a deliberate decision and willingly cross a line, because then at least I would be a person of action. But it just lit up. I was merely passing his desk, intent on opening the window. The house still clung to the stubborn scent of last night's onions. The screen flared, and there, unmistakable, was her name. I cannot repeat the exact words. My mouth refuses to form them, but they left no room for interpretation. This wasn't flirtation. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a sentence a woman sends a man when a history exists that eradicates all doubt. My vision pixelated. The tiny, marching ants of panic swiftly formed a perimeter around me. I stood there, utterly paralyzed, long enough for the screen to dim back to black. When I finally moved, it was to open that window, because if I didn't complete the simple task I'd set out to do, I feared I would shatter straight through the floor. That afternoon, time behaved like warm taffy, stretching and distorting. I prepared dinner with hands that felt utterly disconnected from my body. I stirred a pot, mentally rehearsing a dozen perfectly sane explanations. Perhaps she grabbed his phone as a joke. Perhaps someone else used her phone. Perhaps autocorrect had become sentient and cruel. By the time the kids sat down, I had erected a meticulously curated museum exhibit of rationalizations in my mind. Paul complimented the roast chicken. He inquired about Eric's game, praised Mary for acing her English essay, and then, as he cleared the plates, he kissed my temple. He was a flawless calendar photo of a father and husband. I wanted to ask him what it felt like to be both a performance and a person. I went to bed early, but found no sleep. At 2 a.m, I drifted toward his office, drawn like a person to a window during an unstoppable storm. His laptop rested on the desk, the metal cold beneath my fingertips. I know his password. 20 years buys you certain keys. I opened a folder I'd never seen before, tucked 2 directories deep, bearing a name so bland it could conceal anything. Miscellaneous. Inside were files numbered, devoid of labels, as if even letters might betray him. I clicked one, then another. I won't describe what I saw. I don't need to. The tone, the carefully choreographed control evident in those videos, revealed aspects of my husband I had never been invited to know. There were also screenshots, fragments of conversations, more suggestion than speech. A saved image of Amy at a coffee shop, smiling at a latte adorned with a heart in the foam. Another, of her holding a homecoming bouquet, fully clothed, utterly ordinary, yet preserved like trophies in a secret case. The room suddenly felt small enough to wear like a suffocating shirt. I closed the laptop, pressing my palms against my eyes until stars swam in the darkness, then sank to the floor. Chairs at that moment felt like a luxury my body simply didn't deserve. I don't recall how long I remained there. In the morning, I was the mother again. Mary's hair fought the brush and won. Eric asked for the car keys, digging through the couch cushions. I made toast and forgot the butter. Paul entered, wearing a tie the bruised color of betrayal, and kissed the top of my head. He smelled of aftershave and the most ordinary lies in the world. For a fleeting second, I considered just speaking his name. Just that, to see if he could still hear me across the narrow, silent river we'd built. The day after, I tested reality like a sore tooth. I checked his phone when he showered. I hate myself for that admission, but I did. The thread was unmistakably there, bolded like a newspaper headline. The intimacy between them was sickeningly familiar, possessing the rhythm and shorthand of 2 people who intrinsically know where the other shadows fall. My own name appeared, like a grotesque centerpiece. He had compared me to her. He used words that aligned themselves like a firing squad. She laughed in little bursts, her replies appearing like digital confetti. It's a singular kind of humiliation when someone you once called family finds a joke within your very body. I'd love to tell you I confronted him then, that I took the white-hot clarity of the wound and forged it into a weapon. But I didn't. I placed the phone back exactly where I'd found it, and went to the sink to rinse a mug that was already clean. I counted the tiles on the backsplash, arriving at a different number each time. The ensuing days became a series of scenes where I played myself badly. In the grocery store, I stared at lemons as if they were complicit. At school pickup, Amy waved at me from across the parking lot. She looked like the very essence of spring. She looked like every reason to believe in goodness. I lifted my hand in return, feeling the muscles in my face contort into something soft, something practiced. I don't know if I'm a liar or simply someone desperately trying not to die. At home, I took inventory of the ordinary. The comforting thud of the dryer, the refrigerator's quiet sigh, the innate way this house knew its people. I kept picturing Eric's face the first time he showed me a photo of them, their heads bent together like commas in a sentence I've been eager to read. He loves her with that first love bravery, the kind that believes newness itself is a form of armor. I don't know how to tell him there's a hole in the hull, and the water is already ankle deep. At night, I rehearsed conversations with Paul. In one version, I was a prosecutor, exhibits meticulously labeled, the timeline clean as a bone. In another, I was the wife who simply sat across from her husband and said, "Tell me the truth," like it's a thing we can still hold. In none of these scenarios did I hear an answer that would restore our house to its former place. A calendar hangs on the kitchen wall, its squares filled with dentist appointments and theater rehearsals. I found myself counting forward, searching for a day when all of this might suddenly make a different kind of sense. It won't. I know that now. The mind craves a culprit it can finger: stress, age, restlessness, ego. It yearns for sorcery, a spell I can uncast. But betrayal requires no reason to exist. It simply needs a door left unlocked. Mary asked me last night if I thought Dad looked tired. "He's been weird," she observed, in that acutely investigative tone only teenagers possess. Like he's pretending to be normal. I dropped a spoon. It clattered too loudly against a bowl, and both of us instantly pretended it was nothing. I'm cataloging how many times we pretend in a single day. The list is not short. Eric's happiest place right now is Amy's passenger seat. They drive nowhere like it's a cherished destination. Windows down, music up, youth blaring. He came home, nose sunburnt, and kissed the top of my head on his way to the fridge. "You're the best, Mom," he declared, because the pizza on the second shelf had his name written in Sharpie on the foil. I wanted to tell him everything and nothing simultaneously. My throat held both like a crowded theater. I have not confided in a single soul. Not my sister, not the neighbor who would march in a battle for me with a spatula, not even my hairdresser, who likely knows more about me than most. I am writing to you because these words must find a home in the open air, or they will calcify into a gas inside me, and I will rupture. I keep circling one jagged thought. Did he wait? The day Amy turned 18, did something green light inside him? Was there a clock in his head, counting down to permission, as if morality could be negotiated with numbers? The question makes my teeth ache. It changes nothing, yet it makes everything so much worse. If you're seeking bravery tonight, I don't possess it. What I do possess is a list. I am creating a list because lists are for groceries, for packing, for people who still believe in mornings. It looks like this. Save screenshots without looking at them long enough to drown. Photograph what needs to be remembered in case the world labels me dramatic. Speak to a lawyer quietly, like stepping into a hushed church during a weekday. Find a counselor for Mary, another for Eric. Perhaps one for me, if I can unclench my jaw long enough to ask. Choose the precise sentence for Eric when I finally hand him the truth. Make it short enough to survive. It is late. The house breathes its familiar, rhythmic sighs. Paul is asleep beside me, his body turned away. In the screen's faint glow, my hands appear older than they feel. I try to locate the woman I was before last week. The one who critiqued her own reflection and believed a cleaner pantry might somehow mend her marriage. She isn't here. Someone else is sitting in this bed now. Someone who knows her husband's secrets carry tiny fingerprints. Someone who knows her son's heart is walking toward a cliff with his eyes closed. I keep returning to a single image. Amy at our dinner table last summer, elbows on the wood, chin propped in her hand, listening intently as Eric spoke about a video they were creating. Her laugh rang like a glass bell. Paul refilled her water without being asked, and I thought, What a lovely fatherly gesture. I dwelled in that innocent thought for a full minute. Then I dismissed it and moved on with the evening. If I had known then what I know now, what would I have done? Stood up and overturned the table, perhaps. Collected everyone's plates, set them in the sink, and locked the back door? Time travel is a cruel genre. It shows you the scene, but never grants you the ability to act differently. Tomorrow, I will buy milk. I will text Mary's English teacher about the field trip permission slip. I will remind Eric to charge the car. Ordinary things. This is how people survive wars they never declared. I'm not brave tonight, but I am still here. I am still the person who folds towels into perfect thirds and inscribes her children's names on foil. I am the woman who will soon open her mouth and unleash the truth, and when it comes, it will be a storm. But tonight I am the I. If you are reading this, say a quiet word for the woman who counts the tiles on her backsplash, arriving at different numbers each time, yet somehow still manages to get dinner on the table. Morning arrived exactly as it always has, yet everything looked subtly askew, as if someone had nudged the world a few inches to the left while I slept. The light filtering through the curtains seemed too starkly white. The scent of coffee, too sharp. I could still hear the ghost of Paul's laptop. Click from a night before, echoing in my head like an unceasing metronome. For a few days, I moved through the house, as if it were a museum display of my own life. I straightened cushions already straight, folded towels already folded. Mary complained about her geometry homework. Eric laughed from his room at something Amy had sent him. Every sound felt like a fresh pin jab in my chest. I began to catalog Paul's habits. The tiny, almost imperceptible pauses. The sighs. The precise way he smoothed his tie before leaving for work. He was careful now. Too careful. His phone was always face down. He deleted messages before he even stepped through the door. His deceit, I realized, was almost elegant in its execution. At first, I tried to convince myself that gathering proof would grant me control. But the truth was, I was simply searching for confirmation that my world truly was burning. I took photos of text logs, of file names, of the intricate folder structure. I did it in silence, with the quiet reverence one might use to wrap a body in a sheet. Nights were harder. The house's quiet hum felt less like comfort and more like judgment. I lay beside him, eyes wide open, tracing the familiar patterns of the ceiling cracks, wondering how many of them were new additions. Sometimes, I'd hear his phone vibrate at 2 in the morning. He would shift, check it swiftly, then roll away from me. One evening, Eric invited Amy over for dinner. I almost said no, but refusing would undoubtedly raise questions I couldn't yet answer. She walked in, carrying a plate of brownies, radiating that same sun-drenched energy that once filled me with pride. Paul was at the stove, stirring pasta. When their eyes met, the very temperature of the air shifted. It was subtle, yes, but undeniably present. A flicker that lingered too long, a laugh that didn't quite fit the joke. I watched them both, like a scientist meticulously studying a contagion. Every minute gesture became a data point. The way she leaned in when he spoke, the way he avoided my gaze when she complimented the sauce. I felt my pulse throbbing in my throat. After dinner, Amy and Eric retreated to the living room. Paul, I began clearing plates. His hand brushed mine. I flinched. He noticed. "You okay?" he asked, his tone perfectly casual, disarmingly so. "Just tired," I replied, the lie tasting metallic on my tongue. Later that night, as Eric drove her home, I stood by the window, watching them through the glass. They kissed beneath the porch light. Paul passed behind me, glanced once, then simply walked away. No reaction. Nothing. The utter absence of guilt, I realized, was its own searing confession. I began writing everything down. Dates, times, minute details. This wasn't a diary anymore. It was evidence. I told myself that someday I would need these unvarnished facts, when everything inevitably collapsed. Perhaps a lawyer would. Perhaps my children would. Or maybe, just maybe, I simply couldn't bear the thought of the story being rewritten by him later. Mary, ever observant, sensed something amiss. She lingered near me in the kitchen, asking half-formed questions. "Are you and Dad okay?" "Why?" I asked. You just seem quiet. I wanted to tell her that quiet was the sound a bridge makes just before it falls. Instead, I forced a smile and reassured her we were fine. One afternoon, Paul forgot his jacket at home. As I moved it from a chair, his phone slipped from the pocket. For a fleeting moment, I considered leaving it. Then I didn't. Inside, I found a new message thread hidden under a fake contact name. It was Amy. She was thanking him for a necklace. The attached photo showed her wearing it, a radiant smile on her face. My stomach folded in on itself. I took a screenshot, emailed it to my private account, and carefully placed the phone back exactly where it had been. My hands trembled, but my mind was utterly cold. I understood now that the affair wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was a living, breathing thing, thriving right here in my house. That night, he came home late again. He smelled faintly of her perfume. I asked him where he'd been. Client dinner, he said. Didn't want to wake you. You didn't. I answered, my voice holding a note of challenge for the first time. I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Not because he was caught, but because he knew I had irrevocably changed. I spent the next few days researching therapists, divorce attorneys, even college housing options for Eric. I pictured him learning the truth, and the image felt like holding a fragile glass heart. Every possible version of that moment ended with something irrevocably shattered. One evening, Mary walked into my room while I was staring at old photos on my laptop. Vacations, birthdays, small moments frozen in time before the rot set in. You look sad, she said. Just tired, I repeated. She hugged me anyway, her hair smelling of coconut shampoo. And for a second, I believed I could still shield her from all of this. When Paul left for work the next morning, I finally called the lawyer. The voice on the other end was calm, professionally reassuring. We discussed finances, custody, safety. Each question felt like a tiny doorway back to control. By the time I hung up, I realized my hands had stopped trembling. For the first time in weeks, I ate breakfast. Still, the fear remained. Eric kept talking about Amy, about their plans to visit a college together next month, about a future that simply didn't exist. I listened, nodding, meticulously memorizing his hope before I would have to shatter it. That night, Paul asked if I was okay again. I said yes. Then I added, we should talk this weekend. He paused, searching my face for clues. Sure, he said, his voice attempting to sound steady, but I heard the swift current churning underneath. In bed, I watched the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest. 20 years of my life lay sleeping beside me, utterly unaware that the clock had already begun its inexorable countdown. Tomorrow, I would begin the next part, the part where silence finally ends. Saturday arrived, heavy with humidity, the kind that leaves curtains hanging lifeless. Paul was in the kitchen, making coffee as if it were any other morning. He asked if I wanted some. I told him no. My voice sounded distant, almost unervingly polite. Inside, I held a single, unwavering thought. Today, the pretending stops. I waited until the children left. Mary to a friend's house, Eric to the gym. The ensuing quiet felt far too pure for what I was about to do. I sat across from Paul at the table. We need to talk, I said. He nodded slowly, a flicker of caution already alight in his eyes. About what? About Amy. I answered. The pause that followed wasn't confusion. It was calculation. He was frantically searching for the version of truth that might still salvage him. What about her? He asked, his voice deliberately even. I leaned forward. I've seen the messages, the photos, the things you said about me. He froze. For a moment, he seemed to physically shrink in his chair, as if the very air pressed down upon him. Then came the denial. Quick, instinctive. You're misunderstanding, Lisa. She's young. She flirts. It's nothing. You call that nothing? I countered. You humiliated your wife and betrayed your son. There's no version of this that isn't monstrous. He started to speak again, some variation of, it just happened, it didn't mean anything, the predictable language of people who crave consequence without ownership. I let him finish, then slid the printed screenshots across the table. Stop lying, I said quietly. Something inside him finally cracked then. Not a confession, but a collapse. He buried his face in his hands. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, he murmured. You did, I replied. Every day you chose to continue was a new decision to hurt us. I anticipated rage, but what I felt instead was something colder, more absolute, finality. The part of me that still yearned for an explanation had died weeks ago. "You're leaving today?" I stated. He looked up, startled. "What?" "I talked to a lawyer. You'll hear from him Monday. Take what you need and go." He searched my face for any trace of softness and found none. After a long, agonizing silence, he rose, walked down the hall, and began packing. While he was gone, I sat at the table, staring at the half-full mug of coffee he'd poured for himself. Steam curled upward, slow and utterly indifferent. When the front door finally shut, the ensuing quiet wasn't peaceful. It was absolute. Telling Eric was worse. He came home that evening, sweat-tired and happy. "What's going on?" he asked, spotting the packed suitcase by the door. "Sit down," I said, my voice trembling just once. I told him as simply as I could, stripping away the parts that would scar him more than help him understand. "Your dad has been involved with Amy," I said. He blinked, uncomprehending. "What do you mean involved?" I shook my head. "You already know what I mean." For a few seconds, he didn't move. Then the disbelief shattered like glass. "No, no way. She wouldn't. He wouldn't." I handed him the evidence folder. He read 2 lines and stopped. His jaw worked, but no sound emerged. Finally, he stood, pushed the papers away, and whispered, "I'm going to be sick." He vanished through the back door, and I heard the car start. He drove until dark. When he returned, he didn't speak. He just walked past me and up to his room. That night, I sat outside his door, listening to the quiet hiccups of someone desperately trying not to cry. I wanted to go in to say something motherly that would somehow make this smaller. But there isn't a sentence on earth that fixes the sound of a child's first betrayal. Days blurred. Mary knew something had happened, but not precisely what. "Dad's on a business trip," I told her, buying time until I could find words appropriate for her age. Paul called once, twice, then ceased. I spent my mornings on autopilot. School drop-offs, grocery runs, bills. Every ordinary task felt like scaffolding, holding up a life that was half demolished. Eric started therapy the following week. He didn't want to talk, but the counselor assured me he at least showed up. Mary began sleeping in my room again, claiming she missed the sound of me breathing. I didn't correct her. Sometimes, I still caught myself glancing at the driveway, expecting to see Paul's car. Habit is a slow disease. It takes longer to leave than love. A month later, I met Amy's parents. They asked to see me privately. Her mother's face was pale, her voice small. "We didn't know," she kept repeating. "Please believe us." I did. Blame is heavy enough without handing out extra stones. Amy herself wrote a letter to Eric. He read it once, folded it carefully, and said he didn't want to discuss it again. I respected that. The world didn't end, though for a while, it certainly seemed poised to. Bill still got paid. Mary laughed again. Eric started running every morning before school, perhaps to clear his head, perhaps to find the horizon again. It's been 3 months now. The papers are filed. I run a small office downtown and do bookkeeping for a local store. I've discovered the profound pleasure of choosing my own hours, my own meals, my own quiet. Sometimes when the sun sets just right, I think about that night I opened his laptop. I think about the version of me that existed 5 minutes before and how she died without ever realizing it. The woman who replaced her isn't bitter. She is simply, unequivocally awake. I still keep one picture of us in the hallway. Paul, me, Eric, and Mary at the beach years ago. We're all laughing, faces turned toward the wind. It's proof that joy once lived here, even if it didn't endure. I don't know if forgiveness will ever arrive, but I've stopped waiting for it. Instead, I wake up, make coffee, and open the windows. The air smells like rain and new paint, and something remarkably close to freedom. That's how the story ends. Not with revenge, not with utter ruin, but with a woman finally, irrevocably, choosing herself.